Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. Thank you very much for coming to my organ concert this afternoon. I'll be playing for you one single work, An Wasserflüssen Babylon by Johann Adam Reinken. This piece is one of the most important works in the organ repertoire, and such is its importance that I feel it's important to say a few words about it before I begin. An Wasserflüssen Babylon, in English, By the Rivers of Babylon, is a chorale fantasia for organ by Johann Adam Reinken, based on a 16th century Lutheran hymn by Wolfgang Dachstein, and in your program you can see the melody printed. Reinken likely composed the fantasia in 1663, partly as a tribute to Heinrich Scheidemann, his tutor and predecessor as organist at St. Catherine's Church in Hamburg. With its 327 bars, it is the most extended repertoire piece of this kind, lasting about 20 minutes. And Reinken's setting is a significant representative of the North German style of organ music. The text of An Wasserflüssen Babylon is a paraphrase of Psalm 137, Super Flumina Babylonis, where the Jews lament their Babylonian captivity. The hymn was published in 1525 and was adopted in several major German hymnals by 1740. Heinrich Scheidemann can be considered the originator of the chorale fantasia for the organ, and, based on over 15 attributable compositions, the most prolific contributor to this genre. It was an expansion of the fantasia genre as developed by Jan Pieterszoon Svelink in Amsterdam. Around the mid-1650s, Reinken was, probably in about the same period as Dietrich Buxtehude, Scheidemann's pupil for a few years, after which he returned to the Netherlands. Called back by his former teacher in 1659, he became his assistant as organist at St. Catherine's Church in Hamburg. Around 1660, Stilus Fantasticus, a way of performing that was both theatrical and improvisatory, was the dominant style among the organists in Hamburg, of which the chorale fantasias by both Reinken and Buxtehude bear the mark. In 1663, Scheidemann died and Reinken succeeded him as organist of the St. Catherine's Church. Allein zu dir, a late chorale fantasia by Scheidemann, shares many characteristics with Reinken's An Wasserflüssen Babylon, so it is assumed that Reinken composed his setting around the same time, as masterpiece to conclude his schooling, or most likely when he assumed his position as successor of Scheidemann at St. Catherine's. Reinken's chorale setting appears not to have been intended for liturgical use, neither as a prelude to a sung chorale, as is custom in Germany, but rather as a model for improvisation showing several techniques. In his An Wasserflüssen Babylon, Reinken covers all the techniques of the chorale fantasia: cantus firmus, fugue, echo, figurative writing, and embellished chorale. The composition presents itself as a compendium of the North German style of organ music. Following Svelink's scheme for a fantasia, An Wasserflüssen Babylon has three sections called Exordium, the exposition, Medium, the middle section, and Finis, the finale. According to an anecdote in Johann Gottfried Walther's Musikalisches Lexikon from 1732, Reinken sent a copy of his An Wasserflüssen Babylon as a portrait of himself to a great musician in Amsterdam who had commented on his recklessness to succeed such a famous man as Scheidemann. As reported in his obituary, published in 1754, Johann Sebastian Bach knew Reinken's chorale setting. 2.5 centuries later, it became clear that Bach had known the piece since he was a teenager. When he was studying in northern Germany in the early 18th century, Bach visited Hamburg several times to hear Reinken play. The earliest known versions of Bach's organ setting of An Wasserflüssen Babylon, BWV 653B and A, originated in his Weimar period, from 1708 to 1717. In the early 1720s, Bach improvised for nearly half an hour on An Wasserflüssen Babylon at the organ of St. Catherine's Church in Hamburg, a performance which was attended by the aging Reinken. When the concert was concluded, Reinken commended Bach for this improvisation, I thought this art was dead, but I see that it survives in you. In the second half of the 1740s, Bach reworked his An Wasserflüssen Babylon chorale prelude to the BWV 653 version, which is included in his great 18 chorale preludes, adding a 7-bar coda. This coda ends with a descending scale reminiscent of one of the ends of Reinken's setting, which could be interpreted as a musical homage. In the first part of his Bach biography, published in 1873, Philipp Spitter recognizes that Reinken's chorale fantasia received some extra luster through the anecdote involving Bach, adding that it is nonetheless a work worth to be considered. Writing in the next decade, August Gottfried Ritter is less favorable about the composition, describing it as artificiality and disconnected from liturgical praxis. In 1974, Breitkopf and Hertel published Reinken's organ works, including An Wasserflüssen Babylon, edited by Klaus Beckmann. 2 extant copies of Reinken's composition were known at the time of publication, both deriving from a lost Berlin manuscript. Beckmann's revised edition of the work for Schott was published in 2004, and Peter Dirksen provided a new edition for Breitkopf in 2005, where in the preface he describes Reinken's work as being transmitted via a single source. However, in 2006, Michael Mau and Peter Wolny from the Bach Archive in Leipzig recovered the Weimarer Orgeltabulatur, which contains a previously unknown organ tabulature version of Reinken's work. This copy of the chorale fantasia had originated in the late 17th century in the circles of Georg Böhm, and an endnote on the manuscript in Johann Sebastian Bach's hand dates it to 1700. After having published a facsimile of this manuscript in 2007, Maul and Volney published an edited score of the same in 2008. So, it is Johann Sebastian Bach's transmission that I will play for you now, preceded by Wolfgang Dachstein's 16th century Lutheran hymn. Thank you.